Imagine you're just doing your daily job, walking down a street or making a last-minute decision, when suddenly you're in the middle of a world-changing event. That's exactly what happened to John Scopes, a small-town teacher who, by sheer coincidence, found himself in the middle of one of the most famous court trials in American history. Sound wild? Well, it turns out there are many more stories like his, where ordinary people, by pure luck or bad luck, stumbled into historical events that made their names unforgettable. History books are filled with names like George Washington, Julius Caesar, or Queen Elizabeth. But not everyone who shapes history has their eyes set on greatness. Some just happen to be in the right or wrong place at the right time. We tend to forget about the regular, everyday people who played their roles not by grand design, but by a twist of fate. This piece is all about those random Forrest Gump-like figures, the individuals who stumbled into history by coincidence. You might even wonder, could you or I be next? Number 1. John Scopes, the teacher who didn't plan to start a trial. In 1925, John Scopes was just a young substitute teacher in Dayton, Tennessee, trying to make a living. Little did he know that by accepting a simple request from local leaders, he'd spark one of the most controversial court cases of the 20th century, the Scopes monkey trial. The ACLU was eager to challenge a newly passed law banning the teaching of evolution in public schools, and Scopes agreed to be the test case. Though he never intended to become a symbol of anything, his trial turned into a national spectacle, placing the battle between science and religion front and center, all because he happened to be in the right place at the right time. Number 2. Stanislav Petrov, the man who saved the world. In 1983, during the tense and dangerous height of the Cold War, Stanislav Petrov, a relatively unknown Soviet lieutenant colonel, was assigned to monitor the Soviet Union's missile defense systems. It was an ordinary shift for Petrov, but things quickly took a terrifying turn when the system mistakenly reported multiple incoming U.S. nuclear missiles. The protocol in such a situation was clear: alert superiors immediately, potentially triggering a full-scale nuclear retaliation. This was no small decision. The fate of millions, perhaps the entire world, hung in the balance. But instead of blindly following orders, Petrov paused, trusting his gut instinct that the report was a false alarm. Despite immense pressure, he chose to classify the alert as a malfunction, a decision that prevented an almost certain escalation into nuclear war. Petrov wasn't a high-ranking official or a world leader, just a guy at work who made a call that may have saved humanity from disaster. Number 3. Violet Jessup, the unsinkable survivor. Violet Jessup, an unassuming stewardess, found herself aboard 3 of the most famous ships of the early 20th century: the Olympic, the Titanic, and the Britannic. By sheer coincidence, she survived the sinking of both the Titanic in 1912 and the Britannic during World War I, while also enduring a collision aboard the Olympic. Each time, she narrowly escaped death, making her story a testament to the unpredictability of fate. Whether it was the Titanic plunging into the icy Atlantic or the Britannic succumbing to an explosion, Jessup somehow emerged alive. Talk about being in the wrong place at the wrong time over and over again. Despite all odds, Jessup became a living symbol of resilience and survival, enduring some of the greatest maritime disasters in history. Her story is one of incredible luck, or perhaps an inexplicable connection to tragedy at sea. Number 4. Tsutomu Yamaguchi, the man who survived 2 atomic bombs. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was a Japanese engineer who happened to be in Hiroshima on a business trip when the first atomic bomb dropped on August 6, 1945. Miraculously, he survived the blast. Thinking his ordeal was over, he returned home to Nagasaki. 3 days later, the second atomic bomb fell. Yamaguchi survived that too. He didn't ask to be part of history, but fate had other plans for him. His incredible survival story turned him into a symbol of resilience and the horrors of nuclear warfare. Number 5. Franz Ferdinand's chauffeur, a wrong turn into history. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, is often cited as the event that sparked World War I. But here's a detail that's often overlooked. The Archduke's driver made a wrong turn. The royal couple was supposed to be out of harm's way, but that fateful detour led them right into the path of their assassin, Gavrilo Princip. If not for this small mistake, history could have played out very differently. Imagine being the chauffeur who accidentally helped start a global conflict. Number 6. Rosalind Franklin, the forgotten DNA pioneer. Rosalind Franklin was a brilliant scientist whose work was essential in discovering the structure of DNA. However, by a series of unfortunate coincidences, her male colleagues, James Watson and Francis Crick, got the credit for the discovery. Franklin was in the wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe the wrong lab culture at the wrong time. Her critical contributions were overlooked for decades, but her story now stands as a reminder of how chance can play a role in both success and erasure in history. While her story is tragic, it's also one of recognition for women who have been marginalized in science. Number 7. Hiro Onoda, the soldier who refused to surrender. Hiro Onoda was a Japanese intelligence officer stationed in the Philippines during World War II. When the war ended in 1945, Onoda didn't believe it. For 29 years, he continued to hide in the jungle, convinced the war was ongoing. It wasn't until 1974, when his former commanding officer personally came to relieve him of duty, that Onoda finally surrendered. His story, though accidental, turned him into a symbol of loyalty and the extreme dedication soldiers can have to their cause, even when it's long over. Number 8. Pho Farnsworth, the forgotten inventor of TV. Pho Farnsworth was a farm boy in Utah with a passion for inventing. By coincidence, he became the first person to invent an electronic television system. Unfortunately, legal battles and bigger corporations like RCA overshadowed his contributions. Though his invention changed the world, Farnsworth never got the widespread recognition he deserved in his lifetime. His story is a classic example of how chance can make or break historical recognition. Number 9. Larry Walters, the lawn chair balloonist. Larry Walters wasn't looking to become a part of aviation history, but in 1982, he strapped 45 helium balloons to a lawn chair and took off into the skies of Los Angeles. He soared to an altitude of 16,000 feet, unintentionally entering air traffic control space. Eventually, Walters floated down safely, but not before becoming a media sensation and inadvertently sparking debates about personal responsibility in aviation. Walters didn't plan to be famous, but his stunt made him an unforgettable part of aviation lore. Number 10. Cliff Stoll, the accidental spy catcher. In the 1980s, astronomer Cliff Stoll was working as a systems administrator when he noticed a 75-cent accounting discrepancy. That tiny error led him down a rabbit hole, eventually uncovering a vast network of international espionage. Stoll's tenacity in following what seemed like a minor glitch led to one of the biggest Cold War spy busts, proving that sometimes history is shaped by those who pay attention to the smallest details. Number 11. Gene Kranz, the man behind Failure is Not an Option. Gene Kranz was NASA's flight director during the Apollo 13 mission, and by coincidence, he was on duty when disaster struck. With the spacecraft in danger, Kranz and his team were responsible for bringing the astronauts back to Earth safely. His calm under pressure and leadership in a moment of crisis turned him into a national hero. Kranz didn't plan on making history, but his famous line, "Failure is not an option," became a rallying cry for perseverance in the face of overwhelming odds. So what do all these stories have in common? Every one of these individuals had no idea they were about to change the course of history. Some were at the right place at the right time, while others were just following their instincts. It makes you wonder how much of history is truly planned and how much is simply left to fate. These stories show that ordinary people through sheer coincidence, can end up making an extraordinary impact on the world. Now that you've heard these incredible stories, which one resonated with you the most? Do you think you could ever stumble into a moment of history? Drop a comment below. Like this video if you found these stories fascinating, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold pieces of history. You never know, maybe your story could be next.